A mysterious death happened in April 2022 in Lynchburg, Virginia. Johnny Cashman's mother, who lived far away in Maine, hadn't heard from her son in a few days and started to worry. It wasn't like him. She asked the police to go to his house for a welfare check, where they found Johnny on his back with pools of blood around him. His death was quickly ruled a medical issue, and the case was closed. The family was suspicious and demanded an autopsy, but were denied. They were told to trust the system. But when Johnny's ex-girlfriend entered his apartment a few days after he was cremated, it was obvious his death was not a medical issue. There was blood everywhere. The bathroom looked like a murder scene. I'm about to play you a clip of this episode from Generation Y. While you're listening, be sure to follow the Generation Y podcast on Amazon Music or wherever you get your podcasts.
So this is just not what anybody who had heard about this expected to see, because they thought it was a medical emergency. They had no idea that there was blood everywhere.
And his ex-girlfriend took a bunch of photos with her phone of this scene. And did you look at these photos, Aaron?
Unfortunately, I did.
Yeah.
What do you say to this, Justin? You have an idea when someone says a medical emergency, maybe you can expect some blood, right? But when you see footprints and fingerprints kind of left in the blood, and just the amount of blood that was everywhere, it starts to look like something else happened. And I'm not saying it was, but I mean, it's not exactly the way the police described it. Like, they didn't do this justice.
No, we've covered other cases where I did feel that the person died of drugs or whatever and not been murdered, no foul play, and there was a large amount of blood or bodily fluids found because of the rate of decay and what happens to the body after it dies in a hot room. But when I saw these pictures, I did not get that feeling that this was somebody that was having a medical emergency. This looks like somebody was fighting for their life. Looks like they were bleeding out. Also, in the amount of time between not hearing from Johnny and the police showing up, and that it's April, it wasn't that hot out. So the amount of blood was too much, and it was not contained to one area. It was splashed about. There was a chair that it looked like somebody went and sat down on and then moved around some more. The bathroom just looks like a murder scene. I don't know how anyone could walk into this place and just assume natural causes.
The authorities said an autopsy was not necessary. Now that you see the pictures, you say, no, please, do an autopsy.
But he's already been cremated.
Yeah, he's already been cremated. They can't do it now, right? And now the anxiety, the stress with the family goes through the ceiling, because I'm sure their first thought is, oh no, we've made a grave error here, because by cremating him, now we can't have an autopsy done. They can't go back.
Evidence has been destroyed, and they will never know how he died.
And this is about to get worse, because as bad as these pictures are, more evidence will surface.
What does his girlfriend do next?
Thanks for listening. And be sure to follow the Generation Y podcast on Amazon Music or wherever you get your podcasts.
My friend RJ has always been interested in puzzles. So much so that it sometimes drove a wedge between him and other people. He tends to get invested in the more elaborate ones to the point of obsession. And if you're not as quick to put something together as he is, he can be a bit condescending. Overall, I think he's got a good heart though, so I don't mind it occasionally. I was sitting in the school cafeteria Thursday afternoon when RJ plopped himself down next to me. He wore that same grin that said, "Ted had just posted a new logic puzzle." "So what have you got for me today?" I asked him. "Well, your parents are still pretty chill, right?" he asked back through a mouthful of pizza. "I mean, yeah, I guess. It depends on what you mean." "You think they would let us go out Saturday morning around 3 a.m.? I want to try something out." RJ had piqued my interest, and he was hamming it up now. He was trying to suppress a smile and act all mysterious, but it wasn't working. "You gotta tell me what it is first," I said, laughing to myself a little bit. I knew that he wasn't gonna talk though. He was relishing his little secret too much. He just shrugged his shoulders at me and turned his head back towards his pizza. "I'll tell you more this weekend." Friday night came and I got a text from RJ around 10 o'clock. "Don't fall asleep, I'll be there at 3 a.m. sharp." I knew why he was doing this. RJ didn't have a car and he relied on me to take him places pretty often. Where he wanted to go at 3 a.m. was beyond me though. He's not exactly the kind of guy to go and get drunk in the woods. By 3 o'clock, I was on my second cup of coffee and still fighting to stay awake. RJ showed up at the front door, wide awake. "Ready to go to McDonald's?" he blurted out as soon as I opened the door. I mimed slamming the door in his face, which didn't change his attitude in the slightest. "Alright, I think you finally owe me an explanation," I said, shaking my head. "Why are we going to McDonald's?" RJ explained it to me as we got into the car. Well, he spends a lot of time on 4chan and I don't. Apparently, he came across this thread about weird receipts at McDonald's. There were a couple pictures included from people who had received these receipts. They all had a number written in red ink at the bottom of the paper. As an aside, I tried to find this thread that he was talking about while I went to post this, but I didn't have any luck. I hadn't ever used 4chan though, so if anybody can find the receipt pictures and link them in the comments, I would really appreciate it. RJ told me that some people noticed all of the receipts were processed at 3:33 a.m. on a Saturday. This little detail is what got them thinking that this wasn't a coincidence, but it might be some sort of big McDonald's secret challenge, kind of like Cicada 3301 or something. Now I actually thought this was pretty cool. I knew KFC did something like this with their Twitter account. They sent the guy who figured it out a picture of him getting a piggyback ride from Colonel Sanders. I thought maybe RJ and I could get one with Ronald McDonald if we figured this out. All of the receipts had another thing in common too. They had all ordered exactly 5 menu items. The red number at the bottom of the receipt was always a digit of 0 through 5. These menu items differed from receipt to receipt, but they were all numbered orders. For example, 1 was always the Big Mac. RJ explained that this led to them guessing that the numbered menu items formed some sort of code that needed to be input in the right order. "And I think I know what the passcode is," RJ said in a dramatic whisper. "Look at the receipt with a red 5 on the bottom," he continued. "They ordered 2 number 1s, 2 number 4s, and a number 8. I think those are the digits of the passcode, 11448. They just need to be rearranged." "And you figured out the right order?" I asked excitedly. "Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. I just hope no one else has beaten me to it." "Well, what is it?" "You'll see soon enough," RJ replied. His sly grin had returned. I pulled into the McDonald's parking lot. It was almost completely empty. I could see a couple of employees and a lone customer inside. There was no one in the drive-thru line. "Just pull up to the start of the drive-thru and sit there. Don't place an order yet," RJ instructed me. We have to place this order exactly at 3:33. I didn't like the idea of holding up the drive-thru line, but like I said, there was no one else around, so I figured it wouldn't be too much of a problem. We sat in silence for the next couple of minutes. I kept my eye on my mirrors to see if anyone was trying to get into line. RJ kept his eye on his phone, watching every passing minute. At 3:32, he told me to drive up to the speaker. We sat there silently for what seemed like an eternity as the poor employee tried to get us to talk to her. As soon as a minute passed, RJ leaned over to my window and placed an order. I would like a number 1. I'll take another number 1, please. A number 4, a number 8, and another number 4. We watched as each number popped up on a little screen next to the speaker. RJ seemed dissatisfied with the results. The employee told us to pull forward. "So, how did you know that was the order?" I asked RJ. He wouldn't tell me though. He just smiled and shrugged his shoulders once again. We got our order and we paid. The woman working the window didn't give us a little wink or a knowing nod or anything. In fact, she seemed incredibly bored. I handed the bag to RJ and he tore through it for the receipt. There, at the bottom instead of a red number, was a red address. Holy crap, I muttered under my breath. RJ waved the receipt excitedly at the employee. "Is this it? Are we supposed to go here?" he asked her. The woman seemed incredibly confused. She looked at the receipt and squinted her eyes. She told us that she had no idea what that address was, or why it was even on our receipt. RJ and I exchanged incredulous glances. Were the employees not in on this? Who was monitoring it and writing in the red ink? Maybe they were just instructed to play dumb. We pulled out of the driveway and I had RJ put the address into his phone. It was only about a 15-minute drive from where we were, and sure enough, it was to another McDonald's. At this point, I was totally invested. RJ didn't even have to ask me. I was already driving towards the second location. Once we got on the road again, it was completely silent. There were no cars or people anywhere on the street. I suppose it wasn't too weird for such an odd hour, but still, something wasn't sitting right with me. RJ seemed to feel it too, the sense of calm. There was no sound other than the purr of the engine. No rustling tree leaves, no overhead planes, no crickets, nothing. I shrugged it off at the time as a side effect of being so tired, but I'm not so sure now. When we finally made it to the second McDonald's, the parking lot was completely deserted. There were no cars, not even for employees. All the lights inside the restaurants were on, but peering through the windows, it didn't seem like anyone was inside. "That's weird," I said as we walked up to the front door. "There's no one here." I reached forward and pulled on the glass door, expecting it to be locked. Instead, it gave way immediately, letting off a cheery chime that seemed to linger in the air. Hello," I called out as we walked into the McDonald's. As I spoke, my breath appeared like a thick cloud in front of me. It was freezing inside. Each of our footsteps echoed off the tiled linoleum floor. "Is anyone here?" Silence. "This is so weird," RJ whispered. "I'm gonna check the kitchen. Maybe there's somebody back there." I wasn't so sure if that was a good idea, but he was already leaping over the counter. "We should go," I said. "I don't want to get into any trouble here. This feels weird." "No, wait, hang on," he snapped back. "What's that?" RJ was behind the counter looking out towards the seating area. I turned around, following his gaze. There, alone on a table in the middle of the room, was a single Happy Meal box. We made our way over to the Happy Meal. On closer inspection, we could see a napkin sticking out from under the box. There were 2 words written in the same red ink. "Choose one." I looked back at RJ, and he was nodding at me furiously to open the box. and so I opened the cardboard and I reached inside. There were 2 small figures wrapped in plastic, Happy Meal toys. But as I looked at them more closely, a feeling of dread began to settle in the pit of my stomach. The figure in my right hand was short and stocky, while the one on my left was taller and more slender. One wore a green hoodie and jeans. The other was in basketball shorts and a t-shirt. It was us. The figures were so detailed down to our eye color and shoe brands. They were dressed exactly as we were at that moment. Tiny replicas of terrifying accuracy. RJ reached over and took his figure from my hand. Who could have, how is? RJ started asking through increasingly quick breaths, examining his own likeness in the toy. Dude, we need to get out of here. I managed to whisper back to him. I didn't know what the heck was going on, but I was thoroughly creeped out by the whole thing. This didn't feel like a fun puzzle anymore. I turned and bolted back towards the door, still clutching my figure. RJ just stood at the table, staring at his miniature. Come on, man, I yelled back at him as I threw myself into the door. The door gave way and I was met with a blast of heat. The silence had seemed to crack as I crossed the threshold outside of the store. A train blared in the distance. A dog barked across the street. I could hear cars driving along the highway in the distance. A slight breeze scattered some leaves across the tarmac of the parking lot. It was as if the whole world collectively breathed out a sigh at once. I turned back to RJ. The store was completely dark. There were no lights on inside. RJ was gone. I was frozen in shock. I was standing inches from the door that I had just come out of. A door that now seemed to lead to an entirely different place. I finally came to my senses and pulled at the door again in a panic, trying to get back inside. Maybe RJ had just moved somewhere else, I thought. Surely he was right inside somewhere. However, the door wouldn't budge this time. It was locked. I was completely beside myself at this point, calling out to him in a frenzy and banging on the glass door. After a few minutes of screaming, I had to stop and catch my breath. I sat down on the sidewalk in front of the door. I tried to stop myself from shaking and to calm myself enough to analyze what exactly had just happened and what I should do next. And that's when I looked back down at the toy in my hand. It wasn't me anymore. It was a small replica of Ronald McDonald, but his eyes were pitch black. There was a little speaker on his chest and a button on his back. I threw it onto the ground in sheer disbelief. As it hit the sidewalk, the toy let out a grainy whisper. Good choice. Now start running.